8. Murder of an elder from Khaybar, 626 AD. The Muslims who had assassinated Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf, the famous poet of the Bani Nadir, were considered as heroes by Muhammad and his followers. Murderers were considered as ideal Muslims. To prove their loyalty to their Prophet also, a group of Muslims from the Khazraj tribe decided killing off a respectable member of the Jewish community, Abu Rafi. He was an elderly man who had never done anything against Muhammad or the Muslims. He just happened to be the unfortunate target of Muhammad's plot to terrorize the Jews. Muhammad sent an expedition of 6 men who broke into the old man's house in the middle of the night and slashed him to ribbons as he slept. The cowardly Muslims always assassinated people in this way, while the victim slept, obviously because they had neither the courage nor the strength to fight even a solitary aged Jewish man while he was awake. After their crime, the Muslims fled back home into the arms of their expectant Prophet. There was a quarrel among them as to who had actually killed Abu Rafi. At this, Muhammad smiled beatifically and started checking their swords. Finally, it was decided that the person who owned the sword, which still had traces of food on it, was the winner. Apparently, Abu Rafi had just finished his dinner before falling asleep, and the sword had slashed through his stomach, spilling its contents. Once more, with commendable bravery against great odds, Muhammad and Muslims defended themselves and their Prophet. 9. Massacre, rape and plunder of Bani al-Mustaliq, December 626 AD. Muhammad attacked the Bani Mustaliq because of their wealth. In a surprise raid, the Muslims drove them to the sea. They slaughtered many members of the Bani Mustaliq tribe and looted away a booty of 2,000 camels, 5,000 sheep and 500 women. 500 women were captured screaming and crying after they had watched their husbands and sons being slaughtered. The most beautiful captive was Juwayriya, daughter of the chief of the Bani Mustaliq. Muhammad snatched her to satisfy his own lust. The captured women were supposed to be returned by the Muslims upon payment of a ransom. But the night after the battle itself, Muhammad and his army raped each and every one of them. One of the men, Abu Sa'id Khudri of Muhammad's army, reported, "We were lusting after women and chastity had become too hard for us, but we wanted to get the ransom money for our prisoners. So we wanted to use the azl, coitus interruptus, where the man withdraws before ejaculating. We asked the Prophet about it, and he said, 'You are not under any obligation to stop yourselves from doing it like that.' Later on, the women and children were given for ransom to their envoys. They all went away to their country, and not one wanted to stay, although they had the choice. So the peace-loving Muhammad told his men it was perfectly fine to rape women as long as you don't ejaculate inside them, which would make them pregnant. What supreme logic! Any human being with the slightest shred of morality has to be nauseated by this man and the cult that he preached. Muhammad, the perfect figurehead of Islam, sanctions rape, pure and simple. Not only did the Muslims commit this horrifying crime, they deceived the tribesmen into paying ransom for their womenfolk, who only paid the money in a desperate attempt to save their women's honor. To call such a leader and his followers the epitome of evil is probably an understatement. 10. The last Jewish tribe left in Medina, the Banu Qurayza. By this time, Muhammad had murdered or driven out all of the Jewish tribes of Medina except them. It was time to eliminate this last stone in his flesh. Bani Qurayza had been reluctant in helping Muhammad against the Quraysh. Conveniently, once again, Muhammad claimed that he had divine knowledge about a conspiracy by them to kill him. He besieged their fortress for 25 days. When the starving tribe surrendered, Muhammad forced an old man from their own tribe to pronounce Muhammad's sentence. The sentence was death to every male member of the tribe, slavery for every woman and child, and plunder of all their property. The Prophet had an immense trench dug around the main market of Medina. The men and boys of the Banu Qurayza were rounded up and their hands twisted tightly behind them. Then one by one they were shoved to the edge of the trench and forced to kneel. They were offered a last chance to convert to the true faith, and if they refused, had their heads chopped off. As soon as one head rolled off, the corpse would be kicked into the ditch, and so it went. By the time dawn had colored the sky red in Medina, hundreds of corpses had piled up in a heap in a tangled cesspool of blood, hair, and shreds of flesh. Despite the horrific end in front of their eyes, none of the Jews chose to convert to Islam and face death valiantly. The blood of 900 innocent Jews stained Muhammad's hands on that black day. Their only crime was that they chose to retain their fundamental human right of choosing their own God and the religion of their ancestors. Hysterical women and children screamed as they watched their fathers, husbands and sons die. The majority of them were raped savagely and then bundled off to be sold as used goods. Muhammad had the husband of the Jewish Rayhana bint Amr hacked to pieces before her very eyes, hours after he had murdered her father. No doubt this was Muhammad's perverted version of a wedding present, because after these atrocities he raped the mortified girl and tried to force her to convert to Islam. Muhammadan historians still describe the savage rape of Rayhana bint Amr as her willing submission to Islam and wifehood to the Prophet. Apparently, according to them, it is very natural to imagine that a woman who has just seen her husband, father, brothers and the tribe slaughtered violently before her very eyes would choose to convert to the religion of the murderer and marry him. In actual fact, Rayhana refused to convert to Islam and also refused to marry Muhammad, the murderer of her family. He kept her as a lowly concubine all his life. So much for the Apostle of Peace and his unbounded respect for women. Muhammad was nothing but a predator upon females, a serial rapist who acquired his victims by killing their families first. Allah, as usual, has provided yet another timeless divine revelation which gives his Prophet the right to rape and molest women of other religions. An-Nisa 4.24 And all married women are forbidden unto you except those captives whom your right hand possesses. It is a decree of Allah for you. In short, Allah, the merciful and compassionate, is saying, hey Muslims, it's a crime to go after married women, but if they happen to be your captives, which obviously all the non-Muslim women were, feel free to indulge yourself in rape and sexual torture of them. Lawful unto you are all beyond those mentioned. Allah is making it legal for Muslims to go ahead and rape non-Muslim women by divine law. One shudders to imagine what kind of minds invented such utterly sadistic, disgusting and ungodly ideas. Muhammad justified all his crimes against the Jews with more of Allah's revelations. Although the following surahs were not revealed at the same time as the massacre of Bani Qurayza, they nevertheless give a general idea of Muhammad's views on Jews and why it is perfectly fine to kill, loot and rape them. Al-Ma'idah 5.51 O you who believe, take not the Jews and Christians for friends. They are friends one to another. He among you who taketh them for friends is one of them. Above verse clearly demonstrates the Muslims' hatred of Jews and Christians as prescribed by their Prophet. They also expose the hollow claims of Mohammedans that Islam is a peaceful religion that always coexisted with Judaism and Christianity. The innumerable unwarranted massacres of Jews by Muhammad tell the story in the clearest terms. These historical events form the basis of the Islamic code of behavior. Therefore, the genocide of Hindus, Christians and Jews by Muslims all over the world should come as no surprise whatsoever. Even after the passage of 1400 years, in this 21st century, the fundamentalist followers of Muhammad are more than happy and willing to drag the whole of humanity into the abyss and depraved cult of Muhammad, using Muhammad's methodologies of lies, deception, terror, hate, discrimination and slaughter to obtain their agenda. They cannot change because their Quran and Muhammad's Sunnah prohibit them from ever getting rid of the virus that has infected their brain. It is up to the remainder 80% of humanity, the so-called unbelievers, to quarantine them, re-educate them, and using all the instruments of our laws to deal with those amongst us who want to harm us.